Hey team, this is Nathan from RunDreamAchieve.com. Today's topic I wanted to discuss how to maintain pace in races and for a longer period of time. I wish there was an easy way to make this process less challenging for all of us, but unfortunately that's not the case. I mean, it's very easy for all of us to be able to go out and run very easy for long periods of time. Anyone can pretty much do this, even if you're not even in great shape. But it is an art form to run fast over long periods of time, and being able to manage that higher level of lactic acid buildup when you're racing. You know, as I talk about in other videos, we have an enormous amount of fat storage, but we only have a very small amount of carbohydrate, glycogen storage in our body at any given time. And so it's very, very important to be able to train in such a way that you're burning fat at race pace and conserving what you have much less of, which is carbohydrate. And so I always talk about in other videos the importance of training at, near, or very far below goal race pace. And even, you know, when I was in high school, I wanted to break the 4-minute mile. So I was always focused on running sub 4-minute mile pace for my like 200s, 300s, 400s on the track, where I was always focusing on that speed development. I never quite got to that goal. I mean, I ran 4:25 as a senior in high school for 1,600 meters. Ended up running 4:22 for the full mile, 1,609 meters when I was in college. But I was always focused on training much, much faster than the pace that I was expecting to race at in my chosen races. Same went for the marathon, same went for 10K. It was always focused on, like when I was a 2:43 marathoner, even at 6:14 per mile pace effort at that time, I was always focused on breaking 2 hours and 22 minutes. So I was always running sub 5:25, sub 5-minute mile pace in training so that I could get that 5:25 per mile pace for the marathon accomplished. And eventually I was able to run 5:19 mile pace for 26.2 miles. But it was always because I was running at paces that were sub 5-minute mile pace in origin. You know, I would always focus on running 445 to 447 per mile rep on my track sessions, sub 10-minute 2 miles for repeat 2 miles on the track, running much faster than sub 5-minute mile pace for shorter distances, closer down to sub 4-minute mile pace. So it was always a combination of running sub 4 to sub 5-minute mile pace to get 5:25 mile pace for the marathon to feel more manageable. And it's always going to hurt. It's always going to be a challenge to race over whatever distance you're focused on. But the more you get zeroed in on that goal race pace, and the more you practice running 30 seconds to a minute faster, or even faster than a minute faster than your goal race pace, is going to help you handle race pace sustainment and running and slowing down less than your competition. That is an art form, and that takes practice. It takes time. It takes patience. You will be challenged. You will experience setbacks and doubts along the way, but it's how you handle those challenging times that's going to dictate how successful you are in the long term. Oftentimes we make goals and we seek out times and performances, and we rush the process. We say, okay, I want to run this time in this amount of time. Whereas, you know, if you want to achieve something in a matter of, run a fast time in a matter of a few months, it may take you may not realize it may take you several years to get to a point where you can run that fast. So I think it's very important in terms of how to maintain pace in races is, one, you become very cognizant of your pace strategy early on in your races. Far too many athletes run far too fast too early, and I've made the same mistake myself in past races myself. I remember when I was in high school at our regional championship, I went out the first 400 meters in 60 seconds flat, when really I needed to go out in around 67 seconds, 66 to 67 seconds that first lap. I probably would have ran sub 420 for the mile that day. Ended up running 426. Top 4 went to state. I finished in 6th place with a 426. You know, even when I ran my personal best of 425 when I was in high school, I did that during a race where I was completely by myself, where I could have won the race really in 5 minutes. I was going after my own record of 4:28, and so it's very important to sustain pace in your races, that you don't go out too fast, you don't go too anaerobic too soon, because if you get too hyped up and you get too excited too early in the race, it's going to crush your time. It's going to really diminish what you are capable of in the finish of your race. You want to make sure that you're running aggressive but controlled in the early stages of your races. And again, if you're going to make the big moves in a race, you got to make sure that you've done your homework and training, and you've trained at paces, and you've matured enough to be able to handle those fast, aggressive paces early on in the race. When I ran 2:19 for the marathon, I hit the first half in 1:07:09, which was only 3 seconds slower than my goal, than my personal best for the half marathon at that time, which was 1:07:06. But I had to have, I had the motivation to be able to sustain the pace and still be aggressive in the second half, coming back with a 1:12:26. So if you're going to make the big moves in a race, make sure that you are extremely fit anaerobically, and you are very strong mentally to be able to handle those higher amounts of lactic acid buildup, because that's the key. You want to make sure that you're training in such a way and dropping down your volume and your intensity and tapering in the right way, so that you get to a point where you clear lactic acid faster than it's building up when you're racing. That's why the best middle to long distance runners make it look very easy, because they've trained sufficiently at paces that are so much faster than the paces that they're planning on racing at. You go out and you see these athletes for the marathon running sub 5-minute mile pace, running 4:40s and 4:50s for the entire distance, but they've trained adequately for several months, several years to get to a point where they could run at those particular efforts and would be able to effectively clear lactic acid faster than it's building up. So it is very important too that in order to maintain paces in races, that you're also paying attention to the other tactics that go into running a very fast time, whether that's you're training for a fast 5K or you're trying to run a personal best for the half marathon, that you're hydrating well in the race, that you are running your race and not someone else's race. If you have a plan of running a sub 3-hour marathon, you already know you need to hold 6:52 mile pace. So going out running at 6:05 mile pace with the leaders of the race might not be the best tactic. It's better to be conservative in the first half of a marathon and come back in negative split than to go out far too aggressive the first half of your marathon and blow up in the second half. So again, if you're going to make those big moves in your races, you have to be cognizant and be very motivated to be able to make those moves. And if you're confident and you've done your homework and training and you're very anaerobically fit, you've tapered down, you can race like that. But in order to run a fast 5K, 10K, half marathon, mile, 800, whatever the distance that you're focused on, you have to be very strong mentally, and you have to have dropped your volume and your intensity at the right time rather than the wrong time. I always talk about doing a 10-day taper rather than a 3-week taper. I think the athlete that drops volume and intensity too soon, oftentimes, even though they're rested, they go in feeling more tired and lethargic rather than energized and motivated, as opposed to using a 10-day taper. If you start dropping volume and intensity 10 days out from your main race, you continue to remind your legs and body of what you're training it to do up to only a few days out from your race. And 10 days is plenty of time to recover from a 4-month block of training. All my training plans and training courses on RunDreamAchieve.com are based around this concept of a 10-day taper. And you also need to focus too, when you're preparing for your races, always focus on periodization. Periodization is really just a focus on training at a specific intensity for a specific amount of time before, and once you've adapted to that stress load, which usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks, then you move on to the next stress or intensity and focus on having your body adapt to that stress load, and then moving to the next stress load. So you focus on, focus on intensity, focus on adapting to the stresses that you're placing on your body and the paces, and then gradually, as your body becomes adapted to those workouts that you're doing, you move to the next intensity. And then you focus on, after you've laid your foundation of easy mileage, you've went into your specific training phase, then you start working on your speed, then you start dropping volume and your intensity, and you focus on that critical taper phase in order to go into your main race rested and motivated, because you've done everything in training properly in order to run that goal race pace that you're wanting to hold for the entire distance of your race, not a portion of the race, but the entire distance. And that's the key. That's what is tough. That's what makes running fast over any distance challenging. To maintain paces in races, you have to have trained much faster than goal race pace. The focus has to always be on speed development. Even if you are a long distance runner, you can always improve on your speed. Yes, you need to have endurance, but you also have to have strength and stamina to be able to sustain goal race pace over long distances. And if you're more of a middle distance runner, speed comes even more into play, because you're focused more on those anaerobic events, like the 800 meter up to the 5K distance. Usually from 10K up is going to be more of an aerobic event, where you still need to focus on speed, but endurance and stamina is more of the focus that you need to really place on yourself. So in order to, in terms of how to maintain paces in races, keep these tactics in mind. Start varying up the paces of your long runs. Don't run every single weekend long, slow, and easy. Always alternate one harder paced long run followed the next week by a relaxed, easy jog long run. Because again, to maintain paces in races, you also have to be rested going into those big races, especially the key races of your training build-up. If you run a couple races in the middle of a training build-up, that's okay, and it's normal to go into those races tired because you're not really as tapered. They're more preparatory races, but specifically for the key big races you're aiming for, whether that's a marathon, a half marathon, or you're trying to run a specific time on a specific date, if it's a key race, usually at the end of a training build-up, you want to always focus on your taper phase and sharpening, focusing on your speed development, but focusing on dropping your volume and intensity at the right time rather than the wrong time. That way you go into the race having done everything possible in training to get goal race pace to feel easier rather than harder on the body. So I hope this video makes sense. If you have any other questions or concerns, leave me a comment in the comment section below this video. And obviously, under all of my videos are resources that are available to you if you want to take your racing and your training to the next level. I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you all in the next video.